What does it mean to allow a doctor to have the space, the time to explore being present with their patient so that they can actually demonstrate bedside manner? It felt very freeing to learn tactical empathy, which is the idea of putting another person and their world and their concerns first.
For the oncologist listeners out there, if there were like 3 tactical things that you would tell them to say, hey, like next time you go talk to a patient, try these 3 things, what would those be?
Labeling is just trying to even get a temperature of where is everybody at. And that actually helps a lot. Just go, okay, I noticed this. Well, it seems like we have a big group here because you probably all have a lot of questions. I also really like something called accusation audits. So accusation audits is where you
What could hostage negotiations have to do with patient care? Dr. Kimberly Ku is an oncologist, a researcher, and a champion for value-based care. Outside the clinic, she's a film producer, podcast host, and trained in hostage negotiation. Today is part 1 of our conversation. Kim was doing everything right by the book, but she still felt like the structure of medicine wasn't built to actually connect with the person in front of her. A search for knowledge led her to a masterclass with Chris Voss on FBI hostage negotiation and what Voss calls tactical empathy. We get into a handful of skills Kim has adapted directly for the exam room, including one she leans on when she has to deliver bad news. She also gets into why specific words we choose, and even the ones we only think, shape how connected 2 people can actually feel. If you've ever walked in to see a patient unsure about what you're about to face, this one's for you. Let's get into it. I first want to start where, you wear an unusual number of hats, right? You're an oncologist, you're a researcher, you're a champion for value-based care, you're a podcast host, you're a media producer. When you zoom out across all of that, I'm curious, what do you think is the through line for you and what kind of motivates you to kind of do all of these different things?
I really appreciate how you took that perspective of what's that through line, because I almost don't really look at it like rules. I just think these are all really important parts of who I am. And if I'm practicing my values, I naturally just settled into doing these things. And so I never really actually sat down and thought, oh, I'm going to do a podcast or I'm going to go into media, or as a doctor, I'm just going to do certain things that identify me as a doctor. I think for me, I've been very much wanting to know in terms of values, what does it actually mean to truly think for myself and to communicate authentically what I'm truly thinking in a way that also lands in a helpful, connective way to someone else. And that balance, I find so much fun to learn because everybody is so different. There's so many personality styles, communication styles, backgrounds. And so there's so much learning to be had all the time that I almost have to pull myself back and focus, or else I'll just keep going in every interesting direction, which is every way for me. So I think it boils down to just really wanting to think about thinking, as nerdy as it sounds, but also then how do I get out of my head? And now I'm connecting heart to heart to someone now that I've truly gained some sense of cognitive sovereignty. I have an original idea informed by a lot of other people in my experiences, but how do I really share that with someone? And then how do I understand what they're really saying, knowing that they're existing in their own way and their own values? So that's really what I am trying to go through life understanding, and it just happens to manifest as being a physician or being involved in media. And it can sometimes be very difficult for people to look at it and go, well, what are you or what are you trying to do? And I realize that being able to help solidify that is important. But I also, what I love about you and your work as a founder, and I think of you as a creator and a visionary and a futurist, is that sometimes you don't really need to contain something to really understand it. And sometimes the need to contain is a reflection of one's need to grow your own capacity. So I really love being around folks like you where you ask this question, but you also don't really need it to be fitting any box, just like how I can only imagine you probably love not fitting in any box.
Yeah, I think it's super interesting. I mean, I think having that sense of curiosity is really what breeds innovation. It really what breeds new things, right? And I think especially, if we're innovating in healthcare, for example, it requires like a deep sense of empathy to be able to really figure out how do you communicate with somebody in most cases their most traumatic moments in their life. So much of I think healthcare is being lost in the science and the administration of it that we often forget, there's a person sitting in front of us and, figuring out a way to communicate with that person so that they feel reassured and they feel like they understand the, options in front of them or what they're about to go through is such an important part of just feeling cared for that, one of the hopes that I have and the work that we do is we can bring some of that kind of compassion back into the exam rooms, rather than having to focus on all the science and the administration of all of it. How can you give your undivided attention to somebody right in front of you and just make sure that they actually feel cared for? You told me kind of about this feeling that you had, especially during COVID, where medicine was not really fully working for you. If that makes sense. What were you saying or feeling, then that made you kind of look outside of medicine for answers? Because I think, a lot of our listeners might actually, be experiencing kind of the same feeling that you've had. And I think you're a really awesome example of how you were able to turn, lemons into lemonade, if you will.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate you remembering that because you remembered it verbatim. Because I said it very specifically. It wasn't that I felt that medicine wasn't right for me, but I felt really it was not fitting me, not like me not fitting it. What I meant by that is the more I spend time trying to become a conventionally, traditionally proficient, successful, competent doctor, I still felt like there were so many things that made it more rigid, especially as COVID hit and then all the rules just changed. Everything that we did was different. It was almost like what I had planned for, everything I did that was so much effort, it didn't even really matter in that context. And it made me question what are those truths about what I'm doing that should be helpful and adaptive no matter what happens. And then I should be able to carry this sense of unshakability. I mean, we all get a little bit nervous and scared, but to still be able to hold on to a center compass and say, oh, well, this happened, but it's like a season. I've been through wintertime and I know springtime will come next. And I felt very much like I'm this very rigid structure. I've used this word armor with you, very strong. And yet then it was so easy to crack that when COVID came. And it made me start thinking about how, what if what was wrong with what was happening with the system isn't so much that we doctors don't have bedside manner, but what if the system is also part ownership? And what does it mean to allow a doctor to have the space, the time, the bandwidth to explore being present with their patient so that they can actually demonstrate bedside manner. It's not a one-dimensional skill. It's so many things that have to be put together, including the administration, the operations, and all the non-medical things. So it made me realize that on the one hand, yeah, I really feel that medicine needs to have this architecture that is much more catered to that relationship, the patient and the doctor, and being able to actually show up for each other. But also, in thinking that way, I wanted to also be very fair and think, well, what have I done to also show up so that that entire environment is healthy and symbiotic? It's not just about making things easier for the doctor, but have I done to actually work on bedside manner? And it made me really think how I haven't really had formal training on what is bedside manner. I think in medical school, we talk about communication and we have people we role model after. And there are folks who we think what they're saying we're supposed to do, but it is all very academic. And that it just happened to be at a time where actually I very helpfully got this tip from my husband to watch Chris Voss on Masterclass. And wow, that really hit me that this is bedside manner. And this is what I've been asking. I should have known this when I was a little kid in school, not even just going into medicine, but just basic human score of 101. And I think what really reigns true is the fact that Chris Voss, a former FBI hostage negotiator. So in healthcare, we deal with people's lives. And I think that can have a lot of detriment to our ability to communicate well, connect with people, and be willing to make mistakes that are necessary to learn because we're so worried about, well, we don't want to hurt anyone because lives are at stake. And this is very different from any other field where theoretically lives are at stake, but we may literally have someone in front of us and then a second later they not anymore. And hearing Chris Voss talk as a hostage negotiator where they have lives also at very high stakes, incredibly high stakes. You have to save all the hostages. It was someone who you have to sell them jail time and you have to somehow make them trust you and your police. So I thought that was so amazing that there is now a role model for how do you look at someone who has to save lives, who has to be under intense amounts of stress, and yet they are so reassuring and curious, and they can earn trust and they can do it relatively quickly. Of course, it takes a lot of time, but it, in terms of under stress, being able to conjure that up. And so it helped me unwind a lot of that rigidity that was trained into me. And I realized with compassion that a lot of it is training and then not all completely me. A lot of it is societization. I use this word of how we were born. I use this crazy idea of us being born little children geniuses. But I think a lot of people believe that. And then we get societized. And same thing with medicine. I think sometimes the higher stakes or the more ambition or the more talent, you can really be at risk to even get more armored, rigid, and even lose all those really creative, beautiful things that could offer so much more to more people. And so I feel like by learning the skills of what Chris Voss calls tactical empathy, which is empathy, but a very specific definition and that he delves into of making sure to have someone else feel heard and understood. And you may not even fully agree with the stance, but it's really not about what we want. It's more, what is that other person going through? My communication style is very similar to his, which is so ironic because that communication style can turn out to be quite assertive. And in something that's very relationship building like medicine, it helped me to balance that out too, because a lot of times we're taught about things like kindness and compassion and empathy and niceness. And all these words are very synonymous. But with tactical empathy, I started to realize these are actually very different. It's important to actually get very semantically precise. And words really matter. And the words that we use not only matter, but the way that we think about those words in our head quietly, like casting a spell, it really shapes how we even perceive the world and what's happening around us. And in a lot of ways, the more empathetic I understood that definition to be, then I felt I was understanding the world in a much healthier way where it was more expansive. I think before it was it felt safer to use niceness and then narrow things. But with empathy, I could actually be curious and feel safe while curious and understand a lot more people. And by doing so, increase my own reality of my own networks grew very quickly. So it was such a wonderful, even spiritual experience going through the understanding of tactical empathy and really delving into what it means to actually communicate and practice communication.
Yeah, I think maybe for the audience, can you help kind of define what is tactical empathy? What is the difference to you between empathy, kindness? Just so that, the semantics here are important and there are differences in kind of these things. I would love to kind of, if you can kind of help define those things and share with the audience what you learned.
Yeah. And what I really loved about tactical empathy in my understanding of it, which it, is what I love about it too, is it's not like it's a hard, like, oh, this is what it is and you have to learn it. This is kung fu and you have to, you can't, it's so, it felt very freeing to learn tactical empathy, which is the idea of putting another person and their world and their concerns first. W- And that's such a hard thing to do because a lot of times it's like, oh, well, I already do that. Like I already am so considerate and everything I do is so empathetic. But to actually really show someone that, oh, I'm really thinking about this for you, and I'm not actually all that worried about what I'm thinking or how I feel right now. This is really me trying to, as much as humanly possible, get out of my head and see if I can understand yours. And so tactical empathy, what I really love about it is you don't really have to agree with someone to still show that you understand what they're trying to say and what they're trying to come across. You have to be very careful. It's not faking. It's not faking agreement where you actually disagree. It's showing to someone that you don't have to be only similar thinking to still like you're going to be willing to learn and connect with someone. So an example would be when meeting someone, and I actually have a lot more confidence meeting someone because I feel like I can just extend empathy. Anything, if I'm nervous, I'm like, oh gosh, I don't know anything. I don't know what to say. They like football. I don't know very much about football. I just alienated myself to like the whole world. But if I just go in with empathy, I know everything's gonna be fine because everybody loves feeling like they really want to be understood. I'm not definitely not perfect, but I love the feeling of I'm gonna just go in and try it, and maybe it didn't go so well, but then I'll learn and be better in the next encounter with someone. It's not going to work for everyone because we're not always in the right space to have conversations. But so don't have to take it personally. But what I love about empathy is it's very forgiving, because a lot of what you're doing, it's not about trying to force a result. It's just really being in a space. So I may come up to you and just go like, "Oh, Matt, seems like you're really having fun with this podcast. And I can tell that you really care about all aspects of your business, that you want to jump on a podcast with kind of a crazy a doctor who just rambles on your podcast." And then I just listen to what you have to say, and I'll just be very quiet and listen. And as you talk to me, I'll be listening and watching you and thinking, oh, like, what are the things that he's really trying to tell me? He may be saying something really funny, and maybe this is really smart and I can't understand it, but what is it that he really wants to share with me? And I want to make sure I hear that. And then I want to make sure I check in with Matt and say, oh, this sounds like this is what matters so much to you. And I'm actually trying to make sure, as I'm engaging with you, that am I actually engaging with you in a way where the language is done with skills, and there's actually tangible skills that the FBI hostage negotiators teach. And it's not even unique to FBI or hostage negotiation. It's just more, it lands really well on the human amygdala, where it doesn't feel like fear or friction or inquisition. It feels like opening up and curious, open-minded, inviting you in, warm, but also at the same time, really competently trying to understand what is it that means so much to you that you're trying to convey in this moment. And sometimes it's just extraordinarily fun to not even talk. Sometimes it's also just the presence. And a lot of tactical empathy, they talk about how they would much rather, if anything, you're just connecting with the person than sounding like a robot using the skills. It's not about forcing those skills and seeing, did those skills work? They're meant to be, like anything, tools so that you can just be with another person and be like, oh yeah, I feel you're with me. I think we all feel that when someone's attention's kind of divided and you kind of see them looking at their watch, and we all have that, and I'm certainly guilty of that too. But I think the tactical empathy it challenges you to really stay present and not be thinking, what am I going to say next? It's, what is he saying to me? And I really want to get this. I really want to understand this, and then have skills to show how I'm trying, which is such an important part, is that landing part. Like, how do I actually show to you? And I'm not just going, oh, well, I care, but you would actually say, oh, wow, I felt you cared about what we're doing.
I've never really thought of until we've met, I've never really thought about hostage negotiation or FBI negotiation as an analogy for clinical care. But, after talking to you, it seems like there's so many similarities. I'm curious, I almost feel like you should be teaching a class on bedside manner and the things that you've learned from hostage negotiation. I'm curious, for the oncologist listeners out there, right? If there were 3 tactical things that you would tell them to say, hey, next time you go talk to a patient, consider or try these 3 things that you've learned from, your hostage negotiations, what would those be?
There's probably 10 very tangible skills I could think of, but my 3 that I feel like in medicine have been incredibly helpful. One is what I call labeling, what is called labeling. But labeling is where, and a lot of this is, it's field tested, like people actually use in hostage situations and it actually works. And also there's social science behind this. If you, the more you do these skills, you'll hear other people doing it in a different iteration of a different, it's not hostage negotiation. Now it's sales, or it's not uh, FBI, but now it's how do you go to a boardroom and give a presentation? Like a lot of these, it's not really the field. These are all truths that are part of how we evolve as human beings. But what I liked about labeling is it's so helpful to just take out fear just by acknowledging what something is. And so there's not really an elephant in the room. And I found it very important because I'm oftentimes, when I go into a room, really don't know what to expect. And yet I also know it's probably very heavily charged. They're here at a place for cancer. They probably have their head swimming in a million things. And I'm most likely late just because I'm doing a lot of things and I'm coming in and they've probably waited a very long time. Or in their mind, even if I'm on time, they probably felt like they waited months to see me. So labeling is just trying to even get a temperature of where is everybody at. And it can be very complicated when there's a whole family too. So I like labeling where I try to the best I can. And it is a lot of times first starting out, it feels not very natural. It feels like you're speaking another language. But over time, it then becomes muscle memory. And then I sometimes forget I'm even doing it. There's labeling of myself and the other people. So in my own mind, I'll quietly label and I'll even say, okay, there's 8 family members and I'm kind of nervous right now. And that actually helps a lot to just go, okay, I noticed this. And then I'll think, well, what's the temperature here? What's the getting the pull of the audience? And you can even say the label, like, oh, it seems like we have a big group here because you probably all have a lot of questions. And you can get a lot better with your label the more you practice and the more you get corrected by people. And it's actually really fun to see how over time people end up saying very similar patterns. You start catching patterns like, wow, people are actually, we share a lot of commonalities. I'm kind of wonder if we're like one day walking LLM sometimes. Like the code that we're all wired similarly. And then you can make jokes and anticipate the jokes because they all come out the same. Like, but it's just really interesting. So labels help me a ton. I'm always using it. And it's actually very important that people be able to correct you. So it's very important if someone says, no, that's not a failure. That's okay. That label is helping me because now I actually have some direction and I know let's not go that route. And you can always be very nimble with the skills. Like, okay, that didn't work. So now I'm going to go into my other thing that I really like, which is mirroring. A mirror is where someone else is doing or saying something, and then you try to very subtly show them that you've got it too. So if someone is talking to me and I can tell they're really intense and they're just kind of, and if I start doing that, then there's actually like an oxytocin moment, which is scientifically proven. And I actually have noticed I'll do that without thinking a lot now because I open myself up to it. Whereas before I resisted, I was like, why would I copycat someone? That's just awkward. But when understanding how it is being done and we're not doing it to manipulate someone, it's actually very natural for us to like someone when they're doing something like us. And it's the opposite way too. Like when they like us, they'll start doing things like us. So actually, during very stressful times, I'll try to match the person somewhat, like to help bring it down a little bit. Cause we've probably all been in that situation where it's really bad if you go, calm down. And then the person's like, yeah, basically, yeah. That's like the opposite of a mirror. That's saying you are acting not reasonable and I'm very reasonable and this is
Yeah.
safe. You want to actually, and I've done this very hard where someone is leaning in and and I'll actually lean in a little bit. I won't go crazy with it, but I'll just show them I'm here with you and I'm not really afraid. I'm not going to tell them to calm down. And they'll actually, the energy will actually do it for you, which is really amazing. It takes a ton of practice, lots of practice. And I don't always know what will happen, but knowing that I have these skills, then I just go from one skill to the other. Like, okay, that didn't work. Let me go to my other favorite skill. And then my third one I really like, which is very related, and you'll probably realize how these are all, they overlap and they're very related. I also really like something called accusation audits. And it's a lot like labeling. So accusation audits is where you almost already know what they're going to think and say. So you might as well go ahead and say it. And then interestingly, as you say it, a person doesn't really think that that's so bad anymore. So an example would be I've given bad news where I knew it was probably going to be really bad news. And we get taught to say like almost kind of like say something really nice and then give the bad news and end on like a little sandwich, feedback sandwich. But really it helps for me, I like doing an accusation audit, which is where I go, probably you weren't really wanting to come here and get really bad news. And I'll probably say something that's going to really sound harsh. And then I say it slow, like let them, I can sometimes even see their bodies kind of, they're gearing up for it. And as I give it quiet space and it feels like the timing starts to feel right, then I'll tell them you have cancer. And then they'll be like, I already knew that. That wasn't harsh. I already knew her. So the accusation audit helps them prepare. And it's also a way to subtly say, I believe that you can prepare. I don't need to sugarcoat. I don't need to baby. I don't need to manage how this room is going to go down. I'm just going to let you know this is probably going to be kind of bad, but not even kind of. It's just not really. And you can show up for it, but it's done in a way that has practice and experience, and other people do it. And then there's science of the delivery. And it definitely is something that takes a lot of practice. That's actually what I love about patient encounters is being able to try these skills. And sometimes they land terribly. But the other thing is that encounters are hopefully multiple. So if something was really bad, sometimes they'll come back. And if you were really doing the best you could with empathy, they'll be like, I was being so mean that day and I'm sorry. Or I got in a car crash and then like I wasn't even mad at you. Or I've had lots of really amazing turnarounds where people who I thought hated me, then after so many months, years, keep on trying and being patient with the skills. It's not about getting it right and controlling people. It's over time that relationship starts to build and you can actually feel the bond. And then it's miraculous. Like there are people I never thought would ever like me. And then now they're asking me to go to their anniversary parties and just, so it's so hard to, like, I want to just pour it all out of me and be like, oh, sit here and learn with me. It's so hard. I wish I could share it all. But I definitely love that feeling of seeing someone who feels stuck and then teaching them and they're like, and then they try it and they come back and tell me that was really weird. Like we were taught the other way our whole lives and then we do it this way. And whoa. And I've had some people come and tell me that and it always just feels so magical to gift someone with something, especially because I was gifted by Chris Voss in Masterclass. So
So just to recap, like, three tactical skills is number one, labeling, right? Just going into the room and just start labeling things like how you're feeling, what you're seeing in the room, even saying it out loud so that giving, the people in the room the ability to correct you so that you can have a better understanding of how you actually connect with them. The second, mirroring, which is, just mirroring the either, you know, what they're doing physically, what they're saying, and that really kind of makes people feel like they're actually being heard or actually feel like, what they're saying to you is something that is actually connecting to you. And then the last, I think, was accusation audit.
yeah,
So, just saying, hey, like, in an event where you're saying something really bad is going to happen, don't make the bad news the bad news. Like, if you just, you know, tee it up in a way where they know they're going to get bad news, they're already kind of preparing for it mentally so that when the bad news comes, they'll already feel, wow, like I was already prepared for that. And it gets them into a more mental state where they're able to say, okay, that was the bad news. That wasn't so bad. What do we do about it now? And so those are really interesting. And it's funny because, you would think that a lot of these are, hostage negotiations and you're trying to like negotiate jail time and everything. But these are really just like basic things that I think, in everyday communication that I would say even like children, you see them doing when they're starting to learn how to make friends, they're starting to learn how to socialize themselves and communicate with people. And it's all with the intention of how do you actually just connect to somebody at a deeper level, because ultimately, a lot of these clinical encounters, it's almost you're being trusted by that patient or that patient's family to really like perform a miracle, right? And they want to know that that person that they're putting so much trust into actually really understands what they're going through and can connect with them on a deeper level beyond just the science. And so, it's really fascinating to hear, and I appreciate you for sharing with our audience some of the things that you've learned.
oh, of course. No, I appreciate you asking. I could go on and on.